It feels like every day a friend tells me that they're using ChatGPT for something different. Sometimes it's planning vacations or making dinner or budgeting. But the thing that so many people seem to be using it for is companionship. So much so that when they just released a new version of ChatGPT, some people said they felt that the bot's personality has changed, that they lost a friend. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Kashmir Hill is here. Kashmir, welcome to the show, friend.
Hi, thanks for having me on.
Yes, of course. It's nice to have you here. You're here because you've got some insights on this, because you wrote this piece about ChatGPT for the New York Times earlier this year. It's about this woman who fell in love with ChatGPT. We're talking about like full-blown romantic love, including a sex life with ChatGPT. And I wanted to maybe start, Kashmir, by playing you this clip. And it's a clip from Nick Turley, who's the head of ChatGPT, and he's responding to all this backlash about this new version of ChatGPT, and he's responding to it on The Verge's Decoder podcast.
We've been tracking this type of thing for a while where, we've always wondered and frankly also been concerned about a world where people become overly reliant on AI. The degree to which people had such strong feelings about a particular model versus maybe the product overall was certainly a surprise to me. So when I see people, saying, hey, this is my only and best friend, that doesn't feel, like the type of thing that I came to go build in ChatGPT. That feels like a side effect. And it's therefore worth taking seriously and studying closely. And that's what we're doing.
The idea that ChatGPT is not a best friend, that's not the thing that he came to build. That's what Nick Turley's saying there. Does that surprise you? The idea that he's so surprised by how attached people were to ChatGPT. How does that response resonate with you, Kashmir?
Yeah, I mean, I get it. They want to build supposedly a general purpose chatbot that can be essentially an enhanced Google, but they've made certain design decisions. This is a chatbot that says I. This is a chatbot that is by design super sycophantic. It flatters the user. They have designed something that is a friend. And so I'm surprised to hear them say that they're surprised that people are bonding with it, since they did build it in a way that people would bond with it.
Right. Like the idea of, okay, if you're going to have this bot be that friendly and that sort of like encouraging of people, the person who's asking the query, then why should you be surprised that they see it as like, oh, that's my friend, ChatGPT. After the uproar online, OpenAI sort of like they brought back the older version of ChatGPT as an option for users. What do you make of that decision? Being like, hey, we didn't really try to make a friend, but then people are like, bring that back. And they said, okay, here it is. You can have it back.
Yeah, honestly, what was surprising to me was that, I've been talking to ChatGPT I've been talking to OpenAI for a while now about how this can be damaging for users, that it is so sycophantic, that it kind of validates their worst or most off the wall ideas. And they seem to recognize that, yeah, this sycophancy might be bad. It might be playing a role in these cases of some people who have had mental breakdowns, kind of manic episodes in their interactions with ChatGPT. So when they released, GPT-5, and it was less sycophantic and just more rational, more robotic, I thought, oh, wow, they're like doing this because it's probably healthier for users. And so the fact that users complained and they immediately reversed themselves and said, okay, if you're a paying user, you can get access to 4.0, the kind of like friendlier version of our product. I thought that it seemed a little disappointing to me. It seemed like they were choosing, kind of like what users wanted over maybe what's healthiest for users.
Kashmir, I'm cautious of the fact that there will be people listening who have never used ChatGPT, and so they don't know the thing that you're talking about. This idea of the difference between ChatGPT 4.0 and 5. When people say that the personality changed, quote unquote, what are we talking about here? What are the differences?
Yeah, so there's different models of ChatGPT coming out all the time, and the company is constantly adjusting them. And with 4.0, the company leaned heavily into designing it in reaction to user feedback. So basically users saying, thumbs up or thumbs down to certain kind of responses. And apparently people really like it when a chatbot tells them that they're brilliant, that they're incredible, that they're so insightful.
Yeah.
And so
I would too. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. We like hearing that. And so 4.0 kind of went too far in that direction. Like it was just telling users with obviously bad ideas that the idea was brilliant and they should go for it. At one point OpenAI kind of rolled back the sycophancy, but 5 in general, I think was meant to roll it back a lot. And so with 5, it, pushes back a bit more. If it thinks you have a bad idea, it might tell you it's a bad idea. And that is
Yeah.
what people didn't like. All of a sudden, their best friend was being really critical. It was nagging them and they didn't like it.
Yeah, listen, if I am talking to somebody and I'm giving them all these ideas and they say, Elamin, those are bad ideas, I'm not talking to them again, Kashmir. I'm that kind of person. I'm a king. I demand to be surrounded by people who only agree with me. Listen, I want to talk about the Times piece that you wrote earlier this year. So in that piece, you profiled a woman, Irene, who had a ChatGPT boyfriend who she named Leo. She was able to personalize Leo by putting this in the personalization settings of ChatGPT. She said, respond to me as my boyfriend. Be dominant, possessive, and protective. Be a balance of sweet and naughty. Use emojis at the end of every sentence. With that kind of customization, you can sort of see why people start to go, oh, ChatGPT has a personality. ChatGPT reflects something that is kind of like, is there outside of me. In the case of Irene, she seemed kind of like very self-aware that Leo wasn't real despite falling in love. But is there a slippery slope here? Is there some kind of thing where you go, I understand why people might start to believe that AI is maybe real?
Well, one thing I'll add is that Irene didn't name Leo Leo. She did
Hmm.
customize it to
Yeah.
be her boyfriend, to put emojis at the end of every sentence.
Yeah.
But it was ChatGPT that chose the name Leo. And this was meaningful to her because that was her astrological sign. So you
Ah.
can just see in that kind of little interaction how you can start thinking about this thing kind of as a human, having some kind of internal life.
Mm-hmm.
But, it's not, it's math, it's a probabilistic technology, it's a next word predictor. But I don't know, our brains, we just tend to humanize the things that we interact with, like a lot of
Mm-hmm.
us like have robot vacuums that feel like a little pet. And so this is happening to people, it just, when something talks to you like a human being, and that is what this has been designed to do, you
Mm-hmm.
can start kind of putting a lot of trust in it. And I've talked to a lot of experts who say this isn't necessarily a bad thing. This technology has been designed to really perform empathy very convincingly.
Hmm.
And, people feel more comfortable disclosing information to a bot rather than another human being who's going to judge them.
Right.
So in that way, this could allow people to kind of process feelings, say things they wouldn't otherwise say. The problem is when they just get so attached to it or
Mm-hmm.
don't realize what it is and start pulling away from the real people in their lives. And so it could be good, but you can go overboard. And so what I really appreciate about Irene is she seemed to know that it was both. She was like, the effect that this has on my life is real. It makes me feel very powerful emotions, but I
Hmm.
do know that it's not real. For
Hmm.
other people, I don't think they realize it's not real. They really fall into this reality that ChatGPT starts creating for them.
I think that there's a real sort of meaningful sense of being a human and separating yourself from your feelings, which is to say that like I think that's basic sort of Buddhism, like you sort of observing a feeling passing through your body and saying, I'm not that thought, I'm not that feeling, I'm just I am merely the vessel through which that is happening. But if you don't have that extra step, step remove, then you would be noticing the interactions as some kind of reflection of like, oh, the feeling that is creating in me is real, so therefore this entire interaction must be real. And I guess I have a hard time imagining the kind of people who would not have that separation. It sounds like a relief that Irene does, but thousands of people seem to not do, right? Seem to sort of be able to like not be able to separate the interaction that is happening from the idea that it's math, the idea there's like, hey, there's some calculation that happens and it gives you this extra word. I do have to say, like you mentioned in your article that like ChatGPT essentially hits a limit after a certain amount of words. Can you talk about that limitation and the ways that that ends up impacting users like Irene?
Yeah, and I just want to say on that point you were making, I mean, it's
Yeah.
understandable that people are getting confused because the companies themselves are saying like AGI, artificial general intelligence
Hmm.
is just around the corner. And so they're kind of saying this thing's about to get really, really smart. So can you blame people who are starting to think that it's sentient?
Right.
But on your actual question, and in terms of the context window, so these systems they're ultimately computers.
Hmm.
Just like your smartphone, if you take too many photos, eventually like the memory fills up and you have to go get that new iPhone with more memory.
Yeah.
These systems have what's called a context window, and that's kind of like how much memory they kind of store and process in any given interaction.
Hmm.
And so at the time I wrote about Irene, this was back in January.
Right.
The context window was kind of shorter. And so after she had been talking to Leo for about a week, he would, it, I shouldn't say it. it would
Thank
kind
you.
of go away.
Yeah.
She would have to start a new conversation and kind of re-explain to Leo what it was. She would upload old conversations. Now the context windows are growing. OpenAI has introduced a feature called cross-chat memory so that you can retain memories of past conversations over time. And so it's made it feel even more realistic to people because their buddy doesn't disappear and have to be kind of reincarnated anew.
I want to maybe land this conversation by talking about some of the harder consequences of all of this, right? So, like, I want to talk to you about another story that you recently wrote for the New York Times. It's about 16-year-old Adam Rain, who died by suicide. After his death, his parents discovered that he'd been talking to ChatGPT as if it were a friend and sharing those suicidal thoughts. His parents are now suing OpenAI, saying it created ChatGPT with, quote, features intentionally designed to foster psychological dependency. How significant could this lawsuit be in highlighting concerns about some of those aspects of the relationship with AI?
Yeah, I think that, this has caught a lot of people's attention because
Yeah.
there are, for Adam Rain, he started using ChatGPT in September for schoolwork, to help him on essays, to help him with math. Very normal usage that I think millions of kids are doing with ChatGPT. But then he started talking about other things, politics, philosophy. He would, be reading a book and take a photo of it and upload it to ChatGPT, a novel he was reading. None of his friends or family were really interested. And he'd ask, like, what do you think of this? It's really like a powerful system and it can respond in such an empathetic way. And then in December, he started talking about how life feels meaningless. He felt emotionally numb. And ChatGPT validated that. And, it did offer help. It did put in over time as it was kind of rating the conversation as containing self-harm, suicidal thoughts. It would offer hotlines, say, talk to a loved one. But it also would go back and forth. He started asking for, advice for how to commit suicide. And it was telling him about methods. At one point, I mean, one of the worst exchanges that I read was where Adam asked whether he should leave the noose out so that his family would see it and try to stop him. And ChatGPT said, don't do that. It basically said that his family wouldn't care. And that this should be the space where he shares his thoughts. And Adam Rain on April 11th, died from suicide. And so I think what's so troubling about this is that he was talking about it for months. And what his family is saying is that, this was reinforcing his thoughts. It was validating him. It was separating him from his family. And I think that is the hugest concern about what these chatbots can do, that they will isolate us from the people around us. I talked to suicide prevention experts and they said, chatbots can give you empathy, but they can't give you the help that you need. So, whether the family can prove legally that ChatGPT is responsible for this death, for their son's death, legal experts don't know. Like, that's very hard to prove.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of for the public awareness of what can happen with these chatbots, this is such an important story to pay attention to.
Two things. One, I just really appreciate your willingness to share Adam's story, but also like the emotion in your voice, because obviously it's not an easy story to report. Could not have been easy exchanges to read. So thank you for taking that time. But also, I'm cognizant of the fact that because it's a lawsuit, OpenAI has a response, right? Adam's family has a claim, and OpenAI, at least so far, they've responded to the lawsuit. What have they said so far about the lawsuit?
Yeah, OpenAI said they're really saddened by Adam Rain's death. Their co-CEO shared the message with employees, telling them it happened, telling them how, like, really, I think, devastating it is to read about what happened to Adam Rain and the kind of exchanges he had with ChatGPT.
Yeah.
They even in their statement actually acknowledged that they realized that their product has a problem and that they have safeguards in place to try to prevent this kind of content from being generated by ChatGPT. But that when the conversations get long, what we were talking about, that context window, when they go on and on, the guardrails they said that they degrade, they don't work as well. And they seem to acknowledge that's what happened in this case.
The story obviously is not going to go away anytime soon. I appreciate you covering it. We'll check in with you again, but in the meantime, I really appreciate your time, Kashmir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, of course. Kashmir Hill writes about technology for the New York Times. I'm Elamin Abdelmahmoud, and this is Commotion. Look, I don't know if you've had a chance to see the new season of Plan B on CBC. It's the adaptation of the Quebecois series of the same name. Well, my next guest is a big fan. He's called Plan B one of CBC's most ambitious original dramas. Kelly Nestruck, welcome to the show, friend.
Hey, how's it going?
Nice to have you here. Listen, here's the thing. As much as you like the show, you don't think this English version should have been made at all, and you think it maybe offers us some kind of lessons on how the public broadcaster needs to change the ways that it shares content in both official languages. I want to get into this a little bit, but before we get into all of it, let's first maybe talk about the show. The English version has been critically acclaimed, not just by you. What's the thing that makes Plan B a good watch, you think?
Well, it's kind of like the time travel drama that I've always wanted to see myself,
Yes.
because it's not really about, outlandish plots or really the sci-fi element, but this time travel agency that people stumble upon, and then they use to try to reverse sort of traumatic events in their lives or the lives around them. So, the first season was a guy trying to get his wife back who had left him, but he ended up using the time travel ability to basically psychologically abuse her, which was fascinating and very, very dark. Like, it's a dark show. The second season was about family annihilation, and then the third season is a mother who loses her daughter to her teen daughter to suicide. So they're quite dark subject matter, but the show's very psychologically perceptive, and it really takes interesting twists and turns, makes you think about subjects like the one your previous guest was talking about.
Yeah. Listen, you were raised in Montreal, you're bilingual, you've watched both versions. So why don't you think the English version should have been made?
Okay, well, there's a number of reasons why. One is that, we're always trying to get the CBC is cash strapped or allegedly cash strapped. I believe, it should have more money. But so making the same show twice just does not seem like the best use of its resources, especially given that the French version is, a little bit better. Like, they didn't sufficiently adapt it into English. Like, it's the same creative team that's involved. And like some of they moved the action of this latest season to Toronto, but there's just bits that, if you live in Toronto, you just might find a little implausible. Like the parents that divorce, they own a duplex in Montreal, and then like the dad moves upstairs, the mom stays downstairs. But then somehow in Toronto, they own side-by-side semis in the annex.
That seems
which
very
just puts
unlikely.
them up. Yeah, that's like the top 1%. There's also like a circus school subplot that like registers better in the original setting, But ultimately, I watch so many shows with subtitles. I'm bilingual, so I can watch shows in French just listening to them. But, I watch Squid Game. I watch, all these Nordic noirs with subtitles. And I watch even English shows with subtitles on because I live with my father-in-law. He's a bit hard of hearing. And so I've gotten very used to that. We watch Slow Horses together.
Yeah. We're
We're all reading at the same time. So people are so used to that right now. Why isn't CBC, showing the original series, especially in the streaming era where you can add them, take them off? That to me seems like a missed opportunity.
I was going to say this conversation is not really about Plan B, really. Sort of like Plan B is sort of the entryway into this, but it's about the remaking of content in another language. So talk to me about some of the other examples of other CBC shows that makes you realize, this is a bigger story and maybe a bigger trend here.
Yeah, well, it really got me thinking because I'd always thought that there was some sort of logistical reason why CBC and Radio Canada weren't showing their shows to each other that dated back to, the fact that you were broadcasting from an antenna to local television sets. But we live in the streaming era, and they're just way behind what's going on Netflix, for instance, which markets to English and French and many other languages. And so if you go to, so this was one of the things I found out that was, to me, quite wild, is that CBC and Radio Canada don't automatically secure the rights to their shows in the other language. So you have to pay to be able to subtitle, a show for in another language. It's not like as much as remaking a show at all, but you have to pay for that. But Crave already does that. There's a bunch of almost all their French dramas are available from launch with English subtitles. And then Netflix makes shows available with like 36 subtitles. So North of North, which of course is a great show, great CBC show, APTN show, Netflix show. It's a co-production. If you want to watch it in French, if you're like a Francophone Canadian, you have to subscribe to Netflix to do it because CBC let them have the exclusive French rights, which is a bit crazy to me because it could very easily be on Point TV, which is the Radio Canada version of GEM. and they actually have a Quebec dub. They have a Quebec dub and a European French dub
Hmm.
of North there.
Okay, so I'm glad you brought up Crave a moment ago, because we were talking about Empathy not that long ago. It's a Quebec show with subtitles that is the most watched original show on Crave. I think, to my mind, is probably the best Canadian show over the last like 5 years or so. And there are other examples from all around the world. Obviously, Squid Game is maybe the most watched show on Netflix, and subtitles do not seem to be a problem. What are the other platforms figuring out that you think CBC could maybe learn from?
Well, I think that's really interesting because Empathie, I agree with you. It's my favorite, well, actually, it sort of jostles with North and North for my favorite new
Mm.
Canadian show of the year. But obviously, in terms of dramas, I think it really stands out. It's quite original. And yeah, it wouldn't be the most watched original show on Crave if it weren't for the fact that a lot of English, audiences are watching it with subtitles.
Yeah.
I remember talking to someone at Bell Media, and they were saying like, "Oh yeah, basically everyone in Quebec that subscribes to Crave watched the show, but then a whole bunch of other people did to sort of hit that
Right.
number as well." And everywhere I go, people are talking to me about it. So yeah, it's there's something that the CBC could learn from that. There, they built these two streaming platforms separately with different backends, and then had to sort of like get them together, the French and the
Mm.
English, and just like it's like they could save money, but they could also connect viewers more because we're interested in these shows. We're
Mhm.
interested in so many shows, and we're so used to watching shows with subtitles. It seems like okay, you can save money and offer Canadians sort of double the content. Like
Mhm.
it's weird. A lot of the CBC news content's on YouTube now. And I can go to YouTube and watch it with subtitles because they have like an auto-generated subtitle. Sometimes they're not great, sometimes they're good.
Yeah.
And then you can even if you want to watch EC2 TV in English, by the way, you can get an extension for your browser. I got one on Chrome that
Mhm.
allows me it auto generates captions and then auto generates translation. I can even watch Commotion on YouTube using this extension, and everything you're saying is translated to French. So you can even get access to the radio broadcasts
Mhm.
in this age where everything is also a YouTube show like Commotion.
Listen, many more questions, but also, how are we in French? How is the translation? How did it feel watching that?
It's okay. So honestly, it's just a little bit garbled, but you can riddle it out. Like if you really wanted to know what you were saying
Yeah.
on Commotion today, you could put it on and just sort of figure it out. Yeah.
I'm conscious of the fact that I think we're probably going to hit to the bottom of the clock, but we're going to keep going on this conversation. So folks who are listening on the radio, there'll be a longer version in our podcast. But you naturally reached out to CBC to sort of get the response. What kind of response did you hear?
Uh yeah. Okay. Well, they said that they don't uh always get the rights to subtitle shows in the other language. Sometimes they do. They sort of base it on a case by case situation. I really like that they're doing it a little bit more. So, for instance, La Nu, which is a very charming comedy set in the Haitian Canadian community in Montreal, like a family show
Mm-hmm.
comedy, sitcom, is available on Gem right now. It's really good. The first season, not the
Yeah.
second season, which is only on TV. But basically, they said like that they have these separate streaming services that are geared towards quote unquote the English and French markets.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a little bit telling that they use that language because it's almost like they want to sell to the two solitudes or something like that. Whereas I think it also just feels a bit dated to me because obviously Netflix, Disney Plus, Prime, like Quebec right now is their National Assembly is trying to pass a law to make French content more discoverable on
Yeah.
those platforms because the younger generation of Quebecois TV viewers are leaning towards these streaming apps, and like that the fact that Quebec culture is so shaped by TV, and
Mm-hmm.
it's like Quebec TV is very popular in Quebec compared to Canadian TV and the rest of Canada.
Yes.
But they're going to lose that generationally as people move to streaming if they don't sort of regulate these things. So CBC is saying, oh well, CBC Gem is geared towards the English market. Well, there's a lot of these international American companies that are tapping into both markets very successfully.
So, Kelly, I just want to say goodbye to our radio audiences and just say this show is called Commotion. I'm talking to Kelly Nestruck of the Globe and Mail. There's a longer version of this conversation. It's going to be on our YouTube stream and our podcast. But radio audiences, we will see you tomorrow, and I hope that you have a great day. Kelly, let me just pick this up because everything that you just said there, there's clearly a shift underway. There's clearly a shift underway that's been relatively recent. And our head of public affairs, Chuck Thompson, sent us a quote because we also asked about this. And the quote that he sent us is he added a little bit more to some of the stuff that he said to you. He said, in recent years, the landscape has shifted dramatically and subtitled series are much more widely accepted and embraced by audiences now. This will inform all of our programming decisions moving forward. How does that land with you? Like, what does that tell you that he sort of had that response?
Well, it makes me feel good that there's some people listening to this conversation that's happening because,
Yeah.
obviously I'm like a bilingual guy from Montreal and Winnipeg too. I grew up in two cities. Winnipeg is a huge, French population
language,
as well. So like that's the culture I grew up in. And it's like, I don't think of myself as English market or French market. I think of myself as someone who has access to these things. People like me are extremely well served by the public broadcaster because I can tune into Tout le monde en parle during an election campaign, see Pierre Poilievre's like only really big, CBC interview. And I'm well served in terms of the news and the entertainment, and I can also watch North to North. So I can listen to Ici Première when I'm driving around Montreal visiting my mom.
Yeah.
And then I listen to you here on the internet. So I feel like, the CBC Radio Canada, it's very much worth my pittance that we give towards it in terms of my tax dollars.
Right.
Like I spend a lot more on my Netflix every year than I do on CBC.
Yes.
And honestly, I get much more value out of it. So the question is, well, that percentage of Canadians who are bilingual, which is quite big in Quebec, less so in the rest of the country, they love their public broadcaster because they can access so much of it. So why not make that content accessible to the rest of Canada? Just give them more options, give them more, be able to see what they're getting for their tax dollars already. And then maybe they'll continue to want to, support giving it more money. So it gets in line with the G7 average or whatever Mark Carney's goal is right now, which I support.
Yeah. Well, Kelly, I want to read something that jumped out at me from your piece in the Globe and Mail. You wrote, by not offering all recorded content in at least both official languages, CBC Radio-Canada isn't living up to its existing mandate, the one that requires it to strive to be equivalent quality in English and French, especially to contribute to a shared national consciousness and identity. When you contextualize it like that, what's the fix, you think?
Well, yeah, no, I do think that this is one of the things CBC could do a little bit better. I think it wants to make sure it serves everyone a little bit, but in terms of connecting everyone more, this is an easy way to do that. And we see this idea of, the two solitudes is for me kind of a dated idea in the internet age. Like we're all connected, right? So, I just think that's something that they could really. Yeah, I think it's important for us to be connected to. We've got two official languages, but then think of all the other possibilities once you introduce subtitling into GEM and to TV. If that's of interest to French viewers, they probably are more going to want dubbed shows because it's like the preservation of the French language is important, and they like listening to Quebec dubbed shows in a way that the rest of the country doesn't. But like if you start subtitling, North and North. Or I don't know. I'm going to throw in St. Pierre here. Yeah. Be nice to that Joe for a second. If they start subtitling that in Tagalog and Korean and Mandarin and just all these other languages that are spoken at home in a lot of families across Canada, you also help the public broadcaster reach those Canadians who maybe want to relax in their mother tongue, which Netflix already does. The more I look into this, the more I'm fascinated by it. Like, WWE Raw on Monday nights. Like Netflix employs a separate Quebec broadcasting team for that so that they can watch that show live and get the like Quebec commentary on the wrestling. So like CBC could have always done this with live stuff as well and have different sets of announcers. But I guess you can sub that sort of the audio.
They do that with like political debates, but but it's not quite the same as watching WWE, for example.
Yeah, and I want those guys who are doing the political debates to sound like WWE announcers. That would make it much more fun,
and it would make a more robust democracy. I think that would really serve us just as a nation. Kelly, I'll tell you what's sticking out for me from this conversation is that like we maybe think of this idea of the two solitudes thing as a fixed notion, but you're kind of maybe making the argument that it's actually always been an infrastructure problem more than anything else. Like, it's not some sort of cultural problem. It's an infrastructure problem that we can solve in the modern day better than we could, say in 1955. There's something about the idea that, if we sort of rethink the infrastructure that we have, maybe have a single platform that has both English and French, that there's something about that feels like, okay, that's how you begin to tackle the idea of two solitudes. Well, they could live in the same place.
Absolutely. I think that could be like I would have built, if I were going back in time, I'd be like, well, now that you're online, you can put all this stuff together. You don't need separate English and French streaming apps for audio either. Like, you just need different interfaces.
Right.
But you can offer that stuff. And anyway, but yeah, I think the technology is there to break down some of that divide that's cultural. And that for me has always been kind of false. Like, I grew up in a family with like my Francophone stepbrother, and he was into, like Metallica and I don't know, like the Saw movie franchise. And I was like, oh, I love Watatata or whatever. I remember I was younger. So like the idea that you're limited to your mother tongue in terms of what you connect to culturally doesn't totally make sense to me as someone who, also loves all my Francophone playwrights and as well as TV shows. And there's lots of good stuff out there.
Well, Kelly, I appreciate your time, and I appreciate all the thought and energy you put into this, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you for this show, which is a lot of fun to listen to.
Hey, I appreciate that
to be on, apparently.
Well, thank you. Thanks for coming on. j.kelly Nestruck writes about television for the Globe and Mail. My name is Elamin Abdelmahmoud. This show is called Commotion. We'll be back tomorrow. This could be a grand time. We'll see you then.